I need to release my game now. I've been working on it for a bit over a year now, and I need to get it out so that people can play it for themselves and do the work of finding bugs for me, so I don't have to do it. The game is an action RPG with a unique battle system that melds turn-based strategy with bullet hell action, and I'm calling it Project Seaborn right now. I just made a boss, and he's a big crab, and he shoots lots of bullets, but he doesn't have any animations, so I need to do that first. There are also a lot of bugs, mistakes, and just bad parts I need to fix before I can even think about releasing this game to anybody, so let's get to it. The first day was a Sunday, and I just did a bunch of animations and pixel art. The boss fight is functional at this point, but it lacks any animation and also has a lot of bugs, so I pixeled out some attack and movement animations. And the next day, I decided to listen to some criticism. A lot of people have been complaining about my decisions to make the weapons fly, so I decided to take that into consideration, and I made them more floaty. Now the weapons lag a bit behind you whenever you move, which makes them feel a little bit more independent from you. I'll probably add a few more small effects to really sell the look of flying swords in the future, like particles, and a little bit of animation. And while I was working on making these weapons look better, I also added this trail to Seeking Bullets, which I think looks cool. Then on day 139, it was time to finish up the boss fight animations. So I made some more animations and then implemented them in-game. I also added status effect icons to the enemies and the boss. Basically just reused the system for the player's little status effect thing that I made earlier. And I also took the player's fireball weapon and added the new trails, which look pretty nice. And the next day, I added a small tweak to bullet trails. Now they aren't disabled whenever the bullets are disabled, which lets them fade out more organically. And the rest of the day was spent fixing some bugs, although I think I ended up with more than I started off with. And the next day, I added a little tween effect to the health bar for the players and bosses. One issue that I've had the entire length of development has been that nothing is pixel perfect, so there are little seams in the tile maps, and the pixels aren't all the same size for some reason. So I tried out using the pixel perfect Unity camera, and to fix these issues, but for some reason I can't smoothly zoom in anymore. So I'm going to disable it for now and come back later when I can find the way to zoom in and out smoothly. Then I went on another tangent and started working on a check screen for enemies, when you can learn how resistant they are to different damage types, and also their stats and stuff. In order to do this, I replaced the old damage type system, which just uses these floats which I multiply the damage value by. So I replaced it with enumerators that represent floats. So there's like neutral, which is _1, or resistant ones, which are times something less than 1, or there's weak, which is times something more than 1. And then I threw together a layout for the check screen and then never came back to it. I'll finish this soon, but it's not really required for the demo, so I moved on. On the next day, I made a bunch more environmental art, mostly these new rocks, which I then made breakable. And I kept working on pixel art the next day and made this tree, which I really like. And then the next day, I put the tree in and made a bunch of new trees, and also meshed with color palettes for the environment as a whole. And I think all the grass looks a lot better now. I still had a lot of stuff to do before I could release the demo, so I figured I could try to get it done before the end of the month. The day was July 11th, so I still had 20 days left. I listed out all my tasks I had left, which were mostly tweaks and bug fixing. But also, I need to finally make an animation and final sprite for my last party member, Ava. She's been a clone of Liam for way too long at this point. Day 145, I added some particles to the boss fight, and then started adding plan state actions to enemies. Currently, the player is the only one who gets the chance to use skills during the plan state, and I figured that it would add some more strategy if enemies could use them as well, so I got to it. I repurposed a lot of code that I had for player actions during the plan state to allow enemies to perform all of the same actions, like healing, buffing, adding status effects, and running custom code. Currently, there's only one enemy action in the game, and the boss uses it, and all this action does is switch the state of the boss between the walking phase and the submerged phase. But later on, I'll probably add some enemy actions to do things like buff or prepare a more powerful attack. I also finally made some animations for a party member dying. Morbid. On the next day, I imported a new Unity asset which I've been meaning to try out. It's called Feel, and it adds a bunch of effects that I can implement to improve the game's juice and feel. That's where it gets its name. So I tried it out with dashing, for which I just added some chromatic aberration to, but it's a bit much for something that happens so often, so I moved the effects of the player getting hurt, which I think helps to recognize whenever you're getting hurt better, but doesn't really obscure the screen, like turning it red would. On the next day, I did some more work on environmental art, but I'm getting really tired of all this art, especially since I'm not too happy with how most of it is turning out, so I switched to instead implementing a way to use consumable items outside of battle. You just open up the inventory, click on a consumable, and then click on a player. It doesn't really work most of the time, but I'll iron out the bugs next. So the next day I kept on working with consumables and stumbled into a huge bug that has somehow always existed with healing, and I just never noticed it. Whenever you heal any party member in the plan state, it actually just heals whatever your party leader is. So that means that all of the acts and items that heal don't actually correctly work. So I fixed it. It was really simple, and now you can use consumables inside and outside combat somewhat reliably. And the next day I did a little bit of planning. No, seriously, that's all I wrote down. I had no idea what I was planning. And the next day, I also wrote down that I did some planning. But I also made some proper animations for concentrating to enter the plant state, and I just did this Hollow Knight healing sort of thing. And I don't love how it looks, but it communicates the action well, so it's good for now. Day 151, I finally got to adding details to the entire map using the new art I made, plus a bunch of bug fixing with concentration. Then I started work on an NPC who will help explain the mechanics of the game, which I worked on into the next day, where I actually wrote all the dialogue using a dialogue system I built a while ago. It works okay, but I need to streamline it to save time in the future. And the next day, I got to work on making dead party members actually die and also able to be revived. So I removed some bugs that would just let you switch to dead party members. And then I added reviving players to the things that plant state acts and items can do. And I also worked on bouncing many things in the game, like increasing enemy collision damage, decreasing the player's defense and invincibility time, and fixing some issues with knockback. And on day 154, I made a game over screen. It's very basic, but it should work. And I also used fuel to make some new effects for killing enemies, killing bosses, and taking damage. And I also finally properly implemented a death animation for the crab boss. And the next day I set up a Google forum for feedback for the demo, which has a link in the game. If you find any bugs that I missed or have any other feedback, then please leave it here, as it's very helpful for me. I fixed some bugs on the boss fight with breakable objects and with the lose screen, and then I added the second NPC, which is definitely not a recolor of the first NPC, who explains the mechanics of the boss fight. And on the next day, I fixed about 1 billion bugs. But I also set up acts so that ones like the revive can only target dead party members, and other acts like healing can only target live ones. I also have it so some acts can target all of them. But the more I work on the plant state, the more bugs I seem to find. So I have 2 main goals now before I release the demo. Polish the plant state as much as possible and create the sprite for the final party member, Ava. I added a label for targets, first thing the next day, and then I improved the layout of the plan menu and got to removing bugs. But now I just have one task left, making Ava. I put this off for a while, mostly because I can't get a decent looking hairstyle with so few pixels, and also because I've been wanting to have her outfit be a white shirt with a hoodie tied around it. I think that it's a somewhat unique and memorable outfit design, but I'm having trouble getting the concept across with so few pixels. But after a lot of trial and error, I finalized the design for all of the directions. I think it's pretty good, although I'm not against changing the hair, but now it's grind time. So I spent the rest of the day animating using Liam's movement as a base, and the next day as well. But by the end of day 159, I had it completed and implemented in the game. Neat. And the last 2 days were spent fixing more bugs that kept popping up. But finally, it was time. So I made the last few adjustments and then released the game onto itch.io for free. You can try out this early demo now. There isn't that much content, although the boss could take a few tries. I definitely missed my initial goal to get the beta and video out in July, but I eventually got it out. It'd be great if you could provide feedback, but I appreciate it even if you just play it. And also, thanks for watching. If you want to get caught up on the first 100 days of development for this game, then you can watch this video by clicking here. Bye.